Hi there and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Meryl Johnston. The Lifestyle Accountant Show exists to help today's accounting firm owners build successful firms while also living a healthy, happy life without sacrificing sleep, your weekends, or time with loved ones. Today, I'm chatting with Blake Oliver. You might know him as the co-host of the Cloud Accounting podcast, which he hosts with David Leary. It's a top 25 business news show on the Apple charts. He's also the founder of Earmark CPE, an app that offers NASBA-approved continuing professional education for listening to your favorite accounting and tax podcasts. Blake lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, where he enjoys hiking and playing his cello.
Because people who are actually involved in that rulemaking process, people at the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy and people at the American Institute of CPAs are on, and we're actually making a difference. We have stimulated and participated in the conversation here and really, I think, helped push the discussion forward on how do we modernize the CPA license. Mm-hmm.
In this episode, we talk about how Blake ended up running one of the first cloud bookkeeping firms in North America and then him making a transition into marketing. He shares his process for learning things on the fly, building teams so he can work on multiple projects. I was intrigued to learn that he's got the podcast. He has Earmark, which is software. He's an ambassador at Relay, and then he also has a podcast production agency. So multiple projects and businesses on the go. And it was interesting hearing how he manages his time around that and isn't working long hours. We also dive into his content creation process and the tech that he uses. All that and more coming right up on the Lifestyle Accountant Show. This podcast is brought to you by A2X, Automated E-Commerce Accounting. I'm the founder of B-Ninjas, which is a specialist e-commerce accounting firm working with brands in Australia, the US, and UK. We've tested all of the e-commerce accounting tools out there, and A2X is a core part of our tech stack. I'm going to share an example of how we use A2X with one of our clients. This particular client sells swimwear, which they manufacture in Asia and sell in the US. Their sales channels are Amazon and Shopify, and they had a recent challenge where they were trying to get accurate financials for a loan and were struggling with this. When they moved over to B-Ninjas, they wanted accrual accounting, but previously their prior accountants had only done cash accounting. And because of that, it was difficult for them to show an accurate gross profit and net profit figure when they were presenting their financials to get the loan. This was mainly because of the lumpy stock purchases. Moving over to A2X and using the cost of goods functionality meant they could move to accrual accounting. We could then help them prepare their financials faster, and ultimately they were successful in securing a loan. So if you're an accountant with a client on Shopify or Amazon, then make sure to check out A2X to automate some of the accounting work. Well, let's just dive in. So do you want to give just a little bit of an overview of the different projects that you're working on these days?
Okay. Number one is the longest running project, which is the Cloud Accounting Podcast, my weekly podcast, news and analysis at the intersection of accounting and technology. And I've been doing that with my co-host, David Leary, for going on 5 years, I think, or so. The idea was hatched 7 years ago. We finally did it after 2 years of talking about it. And we are approaching, or have just crossed, really, our millionth download.
Well done.
Thank you. So it started off as a side project, and about a year ago, we went full-time with it. I mean, just meaning that we both quit our day jobs, and that's one thing that we do together. The other big thing is Earmark. Earmark is an app where you get CPE for listening to podcasts, including the Cloud Accounting Podcast, CPAs, CMAs, chartered accountants. It works in the UK. It works in Australia and New Zealand, as I understand it, and Canada as well. And we are NASBA certified, so you can get your continuing education with that app. Earmark Media is the company where we produce podcasts. So we're helping other people create content now. And shows include federal tax updates and Oh My Fraud and a few others as well.
And then I think I've also interacted with you in some kind of community advocate role at Relay. Is that something else on your list?
Yes, there is more. I am the accounting community advocate at Relay, and in that role, I host a show that they produce, and I do webinars, I do events with Relay. We use Relay at the Cloud Accounting Podcast, and I use it for all my businesses, so it's a natural fit.
It does sound like a lot. How do you manage all of those different projects?
Yeah, well, I have a great team, and that helps. So, I don't edit the podcast myself anymore. I have an editor. And Earmark has an operations manager who oversees the CPE content creation. Yeah, just like any good accounting firm, you get people who help you and can, do the repeatable processes and stuff like that. So every time I start a project, I think, how can I make this a process I can hand off to somebody else? And then I can do a bunch of different things because, maybe I'm only doing 5 or 10% of it really, right? But I'm guiding it.
Well, it's interesting. There's multiple different business models there too, because there's the media brand, the Cloud Accounting podcast. You've got a software business with Earmark CPE, and then you've got an agency business model with the creating content. Have you got a favorite in there?
Well, the app is where financially that is ultimately, I think, what could be the biggest thing and have the biggest impact as well, just on accountants. So that's the one I'm really focused on growing. The podcast is great, but we are a niche podcast, right? We are at the intersection of accounting and technology, mainly for small firm owners. There's only so many people in the world who are interested in that particular topic, right? So, but CPE, that's a big thing. There's 660,000 US CPAs, and they all need 40 hours of continuing education every year. And if we can make that easier, if we can make that much more painless, then we're going to help people save a lot of time. That's where I want to focus my energy.
All right. So I want to back it up a little bit. So prior to all of this content creation, I recall that you were an early adopter of Xero in the US, and you had a bookkeeping firm. You scaled that over a number of years to a dozen or more staff, and then sold that business. And then when I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, it went from running a bookkeeping business to, hang on, product marketer, and then head of marketing for a couple of technology companies selling software. So how did you make that transition?
I mean, when you change jobs every 2 years, you can do a lot. I'm not good at sticking around. So basically what happened is I had my own cloud-based bookkeeping firm. I was basically just, to be frank, copying what I saw happening in Australia and New Zealand with Xero. I got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time and stumbled across Xero, did the certification and got listed. And then I realized I was like one of 2 bookkeepers in the US listed on the Xero website. And all of a sudden I started getting lots of leads. And if I just was competent and I helped them, my business grew. So I started doing that as a freelancer, and then eventually grew a team. And basically when I had reached, like a dozen people, I had this sort of crisis. I think that every business owner has when you get to a certain size. There's this breaking point where you're saying, wow, the business is working. But also if one person leaves right now, it's over and my life is ruined for months because I've spent all this time training these people. And the opportunity came along to sell the business. And I said, all right, I'm out, So after that, I got, it's such a winding road, but I took a job at a large accounting firm because I thought they would teach me how to do it, because I was not trained as an accountant in college, right? I was a music major, got into it afterward. And I thought if I go to a big accounting firm, I'll learn how it's really done. And that's where I discovered that they don't know what they're doing either, right? Nobody in the world of cloud-based accounting services in public accounting, they're all just making it up. So I did that for a year, and I just could not handle the big firm mentality. I stuff that I started when I got there was still in the planning stages when I left, after a year. I mean, it was going to take just the timeline was just too long for me. I was not patient. And so I got lured into a product marketing position at a startup in LA called Flowcast. And yeah, that's kind of how I made that leap.
And so how did they know that you had that marketing skill set? Had you been creating content or doing some kind of marketing while you were at that larger firm?
Well, so, when you run a small accounting firm, you have to do everything. So marketing just fell to me. And I had to learn how to do digital marketing, make a website and build an inbound lead funnel and do email campaigns and all that. So like it was kind of something I'd always been doing. And I had a blog. And so, product marketing is something I'd never heard of before, but basically it's just like, as they explained it to me, hey, you're a CPA, you know accounting, and you're also good at talking to people. Come for work for us. We'll put you in front of our customers, and you'll talk about accounting and our software, and do fun stuff like case studies. And so for me, it was a natural fit. Like I said, I was a music major, so I like performing in front of people. I like talking, and so yeah, that like it was almost like the job was made for me in a way. And so that's where I got to learn all the, not just the content creation side of things, but also the demand generation side of marketing and software companies, which is very numbers based. And like that's where all the tech comes into play, and they use the CRMs and the marketing automation and all that fun stuff. So it's really amazing. Like I got really into that because it's also accounting. Like a lot of that is data and science, it's information systems. And it's just, instead of tracking dollars, you're tracking people or leads or contacts or page views and stuff like that. So I love the analytical side of that.
I think that's a great move from accounting software companies to actually hire an accountant or a CPA, because we understand the market. We understand, I can imagine when you were talking to customers and you could say, oh yeah, hey, we used to do this in my firm. And they realize they're talking to someone that really understands them and is talking in a way that makes sense and really understand those pain points. I think that's clever. So were there any things that you had to do to really upskill quickly in marketing? And how did you go about that? Were you reading? Were you doing courses? Was it on the job learning? How did you go from accountant to marketer in a short space of time?
Google. Basically, Google. Learning how to use Google is the number one skill that has propelled my career. Instead of going and asking somebody, the first thing I do is type a search, and more people should do that. And there's so much great information about marketing online because there's all these professional marketing people marketing to marketers. It's like meta marketing, and they do really good marketing because they're selling marketing software. So like HubSpot's a great example, right? You could just read every blog post on HubSpot's website and learn everything you need to know about inbound marketing. So that's my answer. It's just, don't take a class, just Google stuff, right? And now it's going to be just like ask ChatGPT. That's the new answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just in time learning. So instead of going out, I think it's interesting because some people would feel like, oh, I need to go out. I want to move into marketing. I'm going to go and do a degree in marketing and spend 3 years learning all about it and the theory. So then I feel confident when I go and apply for marketing jobs. And I much prefer your approach, which is, no, let's dive in. I'm going to learn on the job. And when I need to know something, I'm going to go and figure it out when I need to know it.
I've never been a fan of traditional education because it's just so slow. Like, why does everybody have to go at the same speed in a class? And usually it's they aim toward the bottom of the class because they don't want to lose people, right? So, don't hold yourself back. I've always been that way. So I like learning from books, or I used to like learning from books. Now it's like learn from the internet, learn from ChatGPT, learn from YouTube. YouTube's an amazing resource. There's all sorts of stuff on there about everything practically now, right? More people creating courses every day. And now there's, professionals, like our fellow professionals are out there creating courses that you can go take on Thinkific or whatever platform they're using. I mean, yeah, if anything's in for a rough ride, I think in the next couple decades, it's colleges and universities. Like they are so screwed.
100% agree. I think that you've got things like the Ivy League and the top universities in Australia, and they've got a brand and recognition, and I think they'll still stay prestigious. But then you've got the mass production of the online courses. So it's those ones in the middle they don't have a fantastic reputation. They're still expensive. Why would you pay all that money to go to a mid-level or low-level college or university?
And I think it's less expensive for you than it is for us, right? I mean, college here, it costs, people come out of school with, $50 to $100,000 in debt. And what do they get for it? So that's why when I was a music major, I went to one of those elite colleges, and I spent my family spent a lot of money on it. I was fortunate not to have debt, but like when I graduated, I didn't have the skills, and so I had to obtain them. I had to learn how to do something that people were going to pay me for other than music, because I decided I didn't want to be a musician. And like accounting and bookkeeping was one of those things you can learn. You can just like if you just read the instruction manual for QuickBooks, or that's what it was at the time, right? It was the actual physical like fat book on the desk that I read. If you just you can just teach yourself how to do it. There's free certifications, and you can have a really valuable skill that way. It's outrageous what it costs here.
Yeah.
It's like for what you get. I mean, and I went to one of the, even the school that I went to Northwestern University. For the amount of money students pay, yeah, you get the network and stuff, but come on. I mean, I would say most students are not getting their money's worth.
Imagine if you took that money and helped your kid start a business. I mean, that's a lot of capital to start a business, or go on some kind of travel experience.
Or a down payment on a house, even that, right? Yeah. I think that's the one thing we have on you is isn't housing in Australia incredibly over
outrageous? Yeah, don't get me started on that.
Sorry, apologies. We'll stay off the hot button topics.
So you branched out into building your marketing skill set, and then eventually you decided to start the Cloud Accounting podcast with David. But you said it took you, you've been talking about it for a while, but it took you a year or two before you actually took the leap. What sparked the idea, and then why did it take a bit of time for you to actually launch it?
So David and I met, and he came up to me and he was like, "Hey, we should do a podcast." Or we were just talking. We were having drinks, and it was his idea. I was like, yeah. And then I started one 2 years later, and I forgot about that conversation. He planted the seed of the idea, and then I started one without him. And then he was like my third guest or something like that. And he's like, "Blake, remember, we talked about this. You should just have me as your co-host regularly." So that's how that started, and it was great. We just had the chemistry. It was fun. He's the kind of person I want to talk to him every week, even if we didn't have a podcast. And I think that's really important if you're going to do something like that. That's a regular thing that takes up a significant portion of your week. It's got to be fun. It's got to be something you would do, even if it doesn't get a lot of people listening to it. So, yeah, it was just sort of like a side project, like a passion project, something I wanted to try. And I wanted to learn how to do the audio editing. I love learning software and technology, and having a background in music, I like doing that. So I felt like I could do it. Now it's a lot easier, right? In just a few years, now we have this audio editing software where you just edit a transcript and you can edit the audio. It's nuts. But back then it was doing waveforms, and it was harder. It took me half a day to edit a podcast episode.
And so in those early stages, you and David together were managing that whole process. So you were taking care of the audio editing, writing show notes. Did you have any contractors helping with any of it, or was that something you and David managed the whole process end to end?
It was just us, and we divvied it up. I did all the editing, post-production, recording, all the techie stuff. And then he did all of the business development. So once we had enough listeners, he's the one who went out and started getting the sponsors. But I don't think we had any sponsors for year one. We did a whole year before we had enough people listening to even contemplate that. It was just something we did for fun because we had day jobs.
So let's dive into some of your content creation process now. I've gone out to LinkedIn and there's a bunch of questions from people there, and I've also got some of my own. So this can be in because I know that you podcast, but I've also seen that you create videos, you write articles, you're active on Twitter. So feel free to answer these questions through the lens of any of the content that you create. First question is, what is your favorite platform to create content for, and why?
Well, right now it's YouTube, and that's because I think it's new, and I always am distracted by the next new thing. We were originally just doing audio, and then we added video to our podcast. So we record both the audio and the video at the same time, and then we release the episodes on YouTube. So that's my favorite thing to play with now. And YouTube has shorts. It's the fastest growing podcasting platform. I mean, you always want to be there wherever the hot thing is. Since we started doing video, our downloads are up 40%. It made a huge difference. I didn't know it would do that, but it has. And then the beauty of it is we can take the video and we can make short clips that we then put out onto Instagram or onto YouTube Shorts or onto, we don't do much TikTok, but we've done, we could put it out on TikTok, all everywhere. And that also really helps, I think. Ever since we started doing that, plus the YouTube, we're way up from what we used to be.
And do you think that's because people are finding you on YouTube? So they're searching for something and then coming across the podcast?
I think the clips are helping people find us. So they'll see a social media clip on LinkedIn and they'll be like, what is this show? And then maybe they'll subscribe. I actually don't know because we can't really track it very well, or I don't know how to. I just know the numbers have gone up. I think that YouTube has helped because we live stream our episodes too. So now when we record, we are streaming live, and we use a platform called StreamYard that lets us stream live to YouTube and to LinkedIn and to Twitter and to Facebook, everywhere. I love it for two reasons. One is that it forces me to be on in a way that I wasn't if I was just recording, and I knew I could edit it later.
Yes.
And two, which is bigger, is we get a live audience. And it's a very small percentage of our overall audience that tunes in live, but they're the most passionate and they comment, and it makes it so much fun. So it's like having an event. It's like a webinar that's also our podcast. It's also live streamed. I feel like we're doing everything all at once. So sometimes that's the way to do it too, is like you want to create as much content from one thing because your time is so limited. This whole live streaming that we turn into a podcast episode is really the way to do that. And that's what we're trying to do with our media company, right? Is we're helping people do that themselves also. Like if you want to do a live stream /podcast /YouTube channel /social media clips, we can do it. And all you have to dedicate is an hour a week instead of like your whole life, which is what it would have taken in the past, right? All this is possible, like just really recently too. Like the tech has just gotten really good for this.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I love about that. That it's one take. So there's no chance to just spend hours and hours on the one episode, retaking things, editing, tweaking. You just got to show up and do it, and then repurposing as well.
Warts and all.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that's where you get the raw content, the interesting conversations. That's something I'm thinking about with this podcast. So we do audio only. And I know everyone's saying, oh, you've got to do video as well. And so I think we will eventually. I record it, but don't use it at the moment because I'm just trying to make sure I nail audio first and focus on improving the audio quality of the podcast. But I think video is the place to be.
We did it the same way, right? We started with audio only. And I actually had to convince David to do video because he's like, I don't want to have to comb my hair every time we... And David has this, like wavy, orange hair, right? So it's like, okay, for him, it's probably work. For me, I just have like you can't see it on the podcast, obviously, but I have like the military crew cut kind of thing. And so it's easy for me. It makes a difference. Like people want to see you, and YouTube's growing. Like I said, it's the number one platform for podcasts now. You can actually create a playlist that's a podcast playlist, and now YouTube will recommend podcasts to people. And I've noticed the trend of like people having YouTube open in a tab while they're working, sort of like the new talk radio, and they're listening to the shows. And it's great because when people are listening sort of passively like that, you got to remember, like when people are listening, they're not really giving you their full attention. And that's actually a good thing in some ways because it means that you can make mistakes. You can blabber on like me, and hopefully, I haven't lost half the audience because they're listening for the full hour, right? Like there's no pressure here. And I think we just have to remember that. I mean, as long as you don't say something really horrible, it's like you're not going to offend. If you say a bunch of ums, you're not going to offend people. Nobody cares, right? Like the worst thing is that nobody listens.
This podcast is brought to you by TeamUp, helping you to recruit rockstar Filipino accounting staff without the ongoing BPO fees. We've had Filipino accountants on the Bean Ninjas team for about 4 or 5 years, but my experience with BPOs has been average at best. When COVID hit and our BPO team moved to remote work, we started to question the value of paying an ongoing monthly fee for every team member, particularly as we had a couple of years of experience now working with an offshore team and no longer needed all of the support that a BPO can provide. TeamUp provides fixed price recruitment with no ongoing fees. It costs around $3,000 for them to run the end-to-end hiring process. That starts with creating an attractive job ad, promoting it on multiple platforms, attracting hundreds of candidates which they vet and interview and test, and ultimately they present the top 3 candidates for you to interview. We've just hired our first accountant in the Philippines with TeamUp. The process took about 5 weeks from beginning to end and saved our manager in the Philippines hours and hours of time. It's a busy time of year for us, and constantly hiring was taking her away from other valuable work like reviewing client files and also managing our team in the Philippines. TeamUp also offers an employer of record service through their partners, and that takes care of the compliance side of things. So next time you're looking to hire a rockstar accountant in the Philippines, check out hireteamup.com. That's HIRE, teamup, TEAMUP.com. So we've got a question here from Matt from BizInc about what apps you use for the production process and which bits are outsourced or not. So I think you've covered that a little bit with you in the beginning handling everything, but it'd be interesting to hear about what does your production process look like now? What apps do you use? How does the process work to create the end products that you just described?
I love sharing this because it's all real shiny new stuff that has really only existed in the last few years. Like our entire business, the Earmark media business where we produce shows, what we do would not be possible like a year ago or 2 years ago. It would be too difficult. So we record using, we used to use Riverside. We use Zencaster as well, which we're using now to record. But currently, because we are now streaming, we use StreamYard. So StreamYard.com allows you to stream to multiple social media platforms simultaneously and to different accounts simultaneously. So we can stream to Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitter. And I think that's it. That's all we do. We can have guests. We can play video clips. We can share our screen. I can change live. I can change how we are displayed on the screen, like side by side, or if it's like, different layouts, basically. And then we can pull in comments from our live viewers across social channels into a single feed for us to watch. And then we can put those comments up on the screen. So this is really important for engagement with your audience, is now they're not just passively watching, they're actually commenting. And then if they say something that catches our attention, it goes up on the screen for everybody to see. And this is not revolutionary. This is something that like video game streamers have been doing now for years and have millions and millions of people, watching. And we're just doing this in the accounting world. So we record on StreamYard, we stream on StreamYard, and we also record the files locally. So StreamYard creates high quality audio video files. We then import that into Descript. That's our editing platform. And Descript edits audio and video simultaneously. So there's no extra work involved as long as you set it up right. And it allows you to edit a transcript. So it creates a transcript from the audio, and then you can delete a sentence and it deletes that from the audio and the video. So you're actually editing text and you're editing audio video, which allows anyone with a little bit of training, I mean, it's not perfect, to do editing, which has totally leveled the playing field in that respect. And those are our two main tools. We then also create social media clips using Descript. They have templates that you can apply. You basically copy paste a paragraph into a template and you've got your video clip that you can then export. We publish those using Social Pilot. That's our social media platform, mainly because it's very affordable to have lots and lots of accounts. Some social platforms, they charge you a lot of money if you want to have 20 accounts connected because they think you're an agency or something like that. We are in a sense, but we don't have like a ton of clients. I think that might be everything.
Let's talk about something similar, but your article writing process. So I think it sounds like you're mainly focused on audio and video, but I've read the odd blog posts from you too. And are you still writing it? And what does your process look like there? Do you have a bunch of ideas somewhere? How do you sit down and write it in one go? Is it a process? I'd love to hear about your writing process as well.
So like I said before, I'm all about getting the most you can out of the least effort. I strive to be as lazy as possible, and I have to be because I moved to Arizona where the weather's great 8 to 10 months out of the year, and I get outside and I get active, and I don't want to be in my office working all the time. I strive to be in there like 6 hours a day at most. I have to be really efficient. The way I create content is it mainly happens on the podcast. That's where I try ideas. I talk through things with David. We if I have a thought, I write it down and we talk about it on the show. And then if that conversation is interesting and goes well, that's like my sounding board. Then it could become a LinkedIn post. And I've already got a transcript. So sometimes I can just actually hand that to a writer. I've got a writer who ghostwrites for me now. And I can say, hey, here's the idea. We talked about it for about 5 minutes on the show. Can you make this into a post for me, an article? And that might be for something that's like an accounting publication. And he'll do the draft, and then I'll give it a look and fix it up, and then there it goes. Now with ChatGPT, like the process has gotten even faster. I can actually feed it a transcript of something I've talked about, and it can write a whole post for me. And it can not only do a pretty decent like LinkedIn article, it can do the LinkedIn post to promote it. It can do a Twitter thread. I mean, in terms of content creation, it's a game changer. That's how I like to operate. Like if I have a forcing function of a webinar or a weekly podcast episode, that's where I can get my ideas out. I can't sit down and just type and write because I have the blank page. It takes me forever, right? It's like 4 hours to write a page. I can't do that.
It's so interesting hearing you talk about that. I did a writing course a couple of years ago called Chip 30 for 30. And they have this concept of data-driven writing. So similar to what you're talking about with David, you'll test out an idea. So something comes into your head, you'll talk it through on the podcast and test it, then maybe post it on LinkedIn and use all of that to get feedback about the idea. And that was their concept as well. Don't go and write a 3,000-word essay on something. Test the smallest version of that idea by doing a tweet or a short LinkedIn post. Test it, see how it goes, and then gradually turn that into something bigger if it lands.
See, that's something I need to do more, actually. And you did it in preparation for this episode, and I think that's really smart. Where you surveyed your followers and said, "Hey, what questions should I ask Blake about content marketing?" And I don't do that enough, actually. I'm not interactive enough on social media. I tend to default into this. Here I created some stuff, I'm pushing it out to you. But then I see people who are really engaging with their audience, and they have way more success, I would say. Like that's the way to go.
It's interesting you say that. So something I try and do is reply to comments on my posts. But I'm telling myself, because it's hard enough for me to just get the content out there. But something I'm working on is trying to engage with other people's content. So not just reply to people that are commenting on mine, but how can I actually think about what other people are saying and then respond in an insightful way? So I don't mean just saying, hey, nice post. I mean, sharing a conflicting opinion or building on what they've said. But all of these things take time. That's the problem.
Yeah. And that's why you have to be like, you have to do a little bit every day, I feel like is the trick, right? Like, and set that in your schedule. So for me, a lot of times it'll be maybe not first thing in the morning because of the time zones for me, a lot of, actually, no, that usually tends to work is like, by 9 a.m. my time, half the country has already been on social media for half the day. And so there's a ton of stuff out there to comment on and to read. And so I tend to do, that's when I tend to do it is like, maybe not first thing in the morning, but like mid-morning. And it's just like a regular thing. I mean, some call it an addiction, but I prefer to call it a scheduled daily session of social media.
Well, it's important. If it's just mindlessly scrolling, I think that could be considered, maybe it's an addiction for some people. But if you actually try to engage and comment, then I mean, that's work, Blake. That is work.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. I can justify my screen time then. Yeah. I think the key is don't have those apps on your phone. I mean, unless you're really good at typing on your phone or dictating, don't have them on your phone because you're going to see something when you scroll and you can't really interact with it.
Absolutely. I've deleted both LinkedIn and Twitter off my phone, which are the two platforms I use. Facebook's been gone for years, but that was really helpful because that is just wasted time. But if you're actually on your computer sitting down, then you're going to achieve something.
And what's great now is you can use these like GPT-enabled plugins like Jasper or Grammarly, And when you see something you want to comment on, you can just type some bullet points, and now it'll comment, a full post for you. And that's a big time saver too, potentially. I'm still learning how to use it. I wouldn't say that I'm 10 times more efficient yet with it, but I can see it with practice. I'll get there.
I haven't used ChatGPT for commenting. I've used it to help me summarize things. I really like it to take, similar to what you said, a long form transcription and then pull out the key points, summarize it, rewrite that. I've used it like that. And I've also used it for writing articles where I have all the ideas, but I go through and rewrite this subheading, write the opening paragraph for this section, and kind of just quickly improved my writing. But I haven't actually used it for any commenting yet.
I know. Yeah. I mean, there's sort of something distasteful about that, actually. I'm like, do I really want to admit that I'm doing that?
But it's your ideas. I think that's what's important. It still needs to be your ideas. So if they're your bullet points, it's okay. But if you said, post the whole thing in, what would you comment to this?
Well, and that's the thing too, is you can do that. You could actually take a social post like somebody wrote and then put it into ChatGPT and say, like, what's a good comment for this post?
What's an insightful reply?
Yeah, what's an insightful reply that will make me sound really smart, but also complement the original poster. But like that's where social media, like that's the apocalyptic hellscape of social media that we will live in when AI takes over and nobody's being authentic anymore. I don't know, maybe that already exists, right? I mean, there's already people who just manage their social media for them, and it and you can tell, right? So I feel like we'll be able to tell in the future too.
I think that's where video will stand out. I mean, eventually that AI can probably do that, but it's not good enough yet. And so I think written content is more likely to be taken over, but video, it's a little bit harder. And so maybe that's where I'm planning to focus in the future.
Yeah, I think video is, like I said, it's, ever since I started doing video, engagement is way up, right? More people watch, more people listen. And I have more fun too, because we're social animals, right? We like to see each other, and video gets us closer than, text on a page.
All right. So next question is from Samuel Burmeister. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Samuel. He's asking about social media platforms and which platform you've had the most ROI on.
ROI. See, that's the problem is I don't even know how I measure the ROI of this stuff. I've tried. When I worked for software companies, we've tried measuring ROI. And you can to some extent on certain activities, but a lot of it is just impossible. Or maybe I'm not very good at it.
I'll reframe the question. Where have you had the most engagement?
LinkedIn has been great. But LinkedIn, for a long time, I think, was sort of this ugly stepchild of social media where it was just people being fake and looking for jobs. And that was kind of how it was known. Since Twitter became this dumpster fire, LinkedIn has really stepped up their game. And they added video. And I don't know, I feel like LinkedIn's a great place to have debates about the future of the accounting profession. And I love that debate. And so for me, LinkedIn has been awesome. Because people who are actually involved in that rulemaking process, people at the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy and people at the American Institute of CPAs are on, and we're actually making a difference. We have stimulated and participated in the conversation here, and really help push the discussion forward on how do we modernize the CPA license. That's where I've actually seen, I've had chairs of state boards of accountancy come up to me at events and say, I love what you're saying about where we need to be going as a profession. And I'm like, where have you heard any of this? They're like, I saw it on LinkedIn, and I listened to your podcast. I
could take that conversation in a whole other direction, but I'm going to stick to these listener questions because we've got only a little bit of time left. But I think that is I would like to discuss that with you at some point in the future around the future of the profession and just what CPA, what chartered accountants could do around changing the way that people are qualified and entry paths into it. But I'm not going to go there right now. Samuel also asks, how much traffic is within the industry versus outside? So what I think he's getting at there, he owns a bookkeeping business, is because your content is mostly related to accountants, that's your audience, whereas his content is probably to do with generating clients.
Well, yeah. So for me, my audience, if I'm looking at this from a business perspective, my social media, my content creation, it's all geared toward accountants and bookkeepers because that is who will, consume my products and services. But if you're an accountant, then, you probably don't want just a bunch of other accountants listening to you unless you're, selling to them, right? But most of the time you're not. You're looking for small business owners to buy your products and services. And so for me, basically everybody who listens to our show is in the profession. I'd say most are practitioners, but then we also have folks in the technology sector that serve accountants who listen. But that's great too, because they're potential advertisers on our show and we sell advertising space. So I think what the answer is sort of like that we're getting to here is, or the takeaway is that you really want to think about who is the audience for what you're creating. If you want to have ROI, then you've got to have the people listening who are, interested in what you have to offer. And I think a lot of times we don't really think about that.
To me, that's spot on. And that's a mistake that I made with the first podcast I had, which is the Bean Ninjas podcast. It was very unclear. Who was our audience? Sometimes we were talking about e-commerce accounting. Sometimes it was our backstory. Sometimes I was talking with other accountants and there was no cohesiveness. Who's the audience? It was different every time. And that's something that we've now taken that podcast in a clear direction. With the Bean Ninjas brand, our audience is e-commerce brands doing 7 or 8 figures. And so now we only create content about that. So now that I also want to create accounting content, then it's a different podcast. But it took quite a few years to figure that out. And I think that's actually a really common mistake, is not being clear about who your audience is. And as accountants, I think there can still be advantages of creating content for accountants. I think Nicole McKenzie on one of the earlier episodes, she was talking about her LinkedIn creation. So she writes a lot on LinkedIn and a lot of it is aimed at accountants, and that's really helped her hire people for her firm. So there is a place for that, but that's not going to get you clients at the same time. You're probably not going to achieve those two objectives.
And that's okay too, right? And actually that's the biggest challenge most firm owners face is hiring staff. If you're trying to grow a firm, right? It's like attracting and retaining talent. And so a lot of times a podcast about your firm or about what you do could be geared toward them and serve a purpose. But you just have to be really clear about what that purpose is and who that audience is. And really, honestly, everything I've ever done in marketing, the success or failure has probably come down to how clear is the value of what we're delivering for the audience that we're trying to reach. And if we don't know the audience, we can't make something that they're going to want. The example, who wrote Winnie the Pooh? And I'm thinking of this because my son's 8. We just read them. The author wrote them for his child. That's why they're so good. He didn't just write them for any kid. He had somebody in mind, a specific age, right? Specific stage of development. And that's why those books are so great.
All right, I think we've got time for one last question. And this is from Paul Miller. And he says, where to start? What are the quick wins to give me confidence in getting started with creating content?
Quick wins. That's the problem with content creation, is there are no quick wins most of the time. And 80% of everything you do in content marketing will result in nothing, at least in my experience. Most of what I make fails. Most of what I do is not a hit. And I think 20% honestly would be good, right? If 20% of what we did. So I think the way to get quicker wins, you're not going to just do one thing and have it be a hit. You're going to have to do 5 to 10 things. So the important thing is to be measuring those things so that when you do get a win, you can just keep doing it, right? And do more of it. And so the example is when I started my firm, I had a blog and I wrote a bunch of blog posts, and then one of them really took off. And that was Xero versus QuickBooks, because in the US market, that's what people were asking, right? This new thing versus this established thing. And so I wrote 8 different articles all on that topic. And those 8, maybe it became a dozen blog posts ended up driving, 80, 90% of the traffic to our website. Month after month, year after year, until other people figured it out and then copied it. And, by then it didn't matter anymore. Figure out what you want to get out of it and then start tracking it and then see what works.
Blake, thanks so much. It's been fantastic talking content with you, one of my favorite topics. If the audience wants to get in touch or find out more about what you do, where's the best place to go?
Best place to go is to my website, blakeoliver.com. You can connect with me on social media. I'm at Blake T. Oliver on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. Also check out earmarkcpe.com if you have a CPE requirement. And that you can download the app and you can find my podcast and many other fine podcasts available for free continuing education. And if you really like the app, you can subscribe for $100 a month. $100, not a month, $100 a year. It's even better deal than that. It's $100 a year. Yeah. So, and if back in the day, I would have said, Meryl, can we please edit that? And I'll retake that and we'll do it again. And I have learned at this point, nobody cares. Nobody cares if you misspeak on a podcast. You just fix it and you move on. So that's what we'll do.
Amazing. We'll drop all of those links into the show notes.
Thanks, Meryl.
I had so much fun talking with Blake and hearing his insights on marketing and creating content in the accounting industry. A few things I found interesting: live streaming podcasts using StreamYard. This isn't something that I've used before or have even heard of. And I can see the benefit. Not only can you engage with your listeners and community, but it forces you to show up and perform. So it would save a lot of time, as you can't really fix things. It's live. And so what's recorded is what's recorded. Where something like a podcast, you could go back and record intros or outros or different voiceover. You could spend hours doing that for each episode. So I found that interesting. I also liked how Blake was talking about repurposing content. So using the podcast as his way of thinking and fleshing out and exploring ideas, but then repurposing that to turn that into articles and social media posts. I think that's something I could do a better job of. I've been known to write articles from scratch rather than trying to repurpose old podcast interviews. And I can in fact think of one presentation I spent about 10 or 15 hours creating a couple of years ago. And then I've never repurposed any of that presentation to social media, to a podcast, to an article, which really in hindsight is wasted effort. So that's a takeaway for me and something that I want to improve at. And the last point was, we have talked about this before on the show, but it's a good reminder of getting clear about who your audience is and then creating content to them. So if you're writing content for accountants, that is a different audience to if you're writing content or creating marketing material for business clients for the purpose of trying to attract clients to your firm. If you'd like to get in touch with us directly or find out more about the podcast, head on over to lifestyleaccountant.co.